The ceremony had already begun when the doors at the back of the auditorium creaked open. A hush fell over the last few rows as a tall, weathered man stepped inside, stooped but steady, wearing a faded navy dress uniform that had clearly seen better days. His shoes were polished with quiet reverence, but the fabric of his jacket carried the weight of time and war. On his chest, rows of ribbons clung to his heart like unspoken memories. No one turned to greet him. In his calloused hand, he held a simple card, creased, slightly bent, and written in a child's uneven but earnest handwriting. "Dad, sit in the front row. You deserve it." There was no seal, no barcode, no formal invitation, just ink and love, and decades of silence between a father and his son. He walked down the aisle slowly, nodding politely to those who glanced at him, and then quickly away. The closer he moved to the front, the tighter the smiles became. Whispers fluttered like moths in the air. Who is he? Why is he dressed like that? Where is his pass? Security approached him before he reached the fourth row. "Sir," one of them said, not unkindly, but firmly. "Do you have a ticket or a guest pass?" He looked down at the card again, then held it up, not defensively, but like a man offering his only credential in a world that had long stopped asking who he was. "My son wrote this," he said. His voice was deep, yet gentled by age. "He's graduating today. He said I should sit in the front." The second guard exchanged a glance with the first. The one with the clipboard stepped forward. "I'm sorry, sir. We need formal credentials to access the reserved seating. If you'd like, you may sit in the general seating area." But the man had already nodded. Not angrily. Not with the sting of wounded pride. Just acceptance. He turned without protest and made his way to the very back of the auditorium, to a folding chair beneath a glowing red exit sign that flickered now and then, as if the building itself was unsure whether to welcome or dismiss him. He sat alone, upright, silent, watching. From this distant vantage, the stage looked like a world away. He squinted, perhaps to recognize his son among the sea of identical caps and gowns. Or perhaps to hold back the sting of salt water that wasn't from the ocean but from a past he had never shared. No one noticed him. No one applauded when he sat down. No cameras turned to capture his presence. And yet, even from the shadowed edge of the room, he sat as though he were guarding something. Maybe the memory of those he once led, or the promise he'd made to a boy who once called him a hero, before time and silence placed oceans between them. The brass on his chest caught the light when the screen above flickered to life. Names were being read. Applause grew. But beneath the exit sign, one man sat still, as if the world had paused just long enough for him to remember what it meant to simply be there, not as a guest, not as a hero, but as a father who had shown up, without applause, without invitation, without need for validation. Sometimes, presence is the loudest honor. The applause thundered like waves, crashing and receding with each name called. Some stood proudly when their sons or daughters walked across the stage, snapping photos, waving, cheering, loud, visible, present. But beneath the exit sign, he simply watched. His hands rested on his knees, still and veined, as if even clapping might break the fragile quiet he carried with him. The cap and gown figures blurred into one another, and he wasn't sure he could recognize his son from this distance. But he waited. He had waited his whole life for moments like this, moments he was rarely allowed to attend. Then, the name was spoken, not the one on his birth certificate, but the name his son had taken after the divorce, after the silence, after all the letters stopped coming back. Kyle Brennan. The auditorium roared for him. Cameras flashed. A cluster of people, family, friends, maybe his mother's new husband, stood and clapped with the kind of exuberance that leaves no space for ghosts. He rose slightly in his seat, craning his neck for just a glimpse. His eyes flicked to the large screen. Kyle's photo flashed momentarily. A young man in dress uniform, shoulders square, eyes bright, future ahead. Then gone. Another name, another cheer. The world moved on. But something held him in place. A pull, not from the stage but from the people. He felt it first as a prickle on the back of his neck, then a shift in air, then eyes. Not one, not two, but several. A cluster of young cadets in uniform seated near the side had noticed him. Not the way others did, curious or suspicious, but in that way soldiers recognize their own. Their conversation slowed. They glanced from his chest to his shoes to the invisible weight he carried on his shoulders. Their bodies straightened. One of them, a woman with sharp eyes and a quiet gaze, nudged her friend and nodded toward him. No words were exchanged, just acknowledgement. Quiet, intentional, real. And then, unexpectedly, one of them stood. Just for a second, as if to stretch, as if by accident. But her hand rose in a subtle, respectful salute, not aimed at the stage, but at the very back of the room, beneath the exit sign. No one noticed. No one clapped for that. Except the others. Like falling dominoes, 3 more cadets slowly rose and followed suit. Not dramatic. Not disruptive. Just right. One adjusted his tie and gave a nod. Another stood with his hand resting over his heart, his eyes briefly locking with the old man's. And for the first time that morning, the man's eyes flickered. Not with pride, but with something deeper. Recognition. Connection. A quiet exhale from a heart that had grown used to beating alone. He didn't wave back. He didn't nod. He simply met their eyes. Eyes that didn't shout. Eyes that didn't ask. Eyes that didn't need to speak to be understood. When the ceremony ended and the graduates surged into the aisles like waves crashing against the shore, he remained seated, as if uncertain whether to move or vanish. He looked one last time toward the stage. Kyle had already disappeared into a crowd of congratulations and camera flashes. The space was full of joy, of future, of noise. But in that noise, 4 young cadets quietly filed out the side door, and not one of them looked back. They had said what they needed to say, without a single word. And beneath the exit sign, the man let the silence settle over him like a folded flag, worn, yes, but never discarded. The crowd had thinned. The decorations trembled slightly in the breeze from an overhead vent. Confetti lingered on the polished floor like traces of joy that hadn't yet been swept away. He rose slowly from his chair beneath the exit sign, spine stiff from the years, not the weight. The world around him was alive with laughter and plans and the bright heat of possibility, but he moved through it like a ghost trailing the scent of salt and cordite. He followed the crowd at a distance, out into the courtyard where families embraced and car horns sang a triumphant chorus. He didn't seek out his son. He had no words rehearsed. No gift. Only the same card folded once in his jacket pocket, the one he had brought like a relic, as if the ink might prove he belonged. At the edge of the parking lot, a white sedan idled. Beside it, a woman leaned against the door, phone in hand, heels sinking slightly into the grass. He recognized her instantly. Not from recent memory, but from the fragments that stubbornly refused to fade. The lift of her chin, the stern curve of her brow, the same posture she wore when she told him she was done. Kyle's mother. Her hair was shorter now, her jewelry louder, her indifference unchanged. She saw him before he spoke. He removed his cap, not in greeting, but in deference to what was never fully buried. "I didn't think you'd come," she said, not smiling. "You didn't RSVP. I wasn't sure I'd be welcome." "You weren't." Her words cut clean. Not cruelly. Not dramatically. Just plainly. Like a statement of fact. And somehow that hurt more. Her gaze dropped to his chest, to the metals that clung to the fabric like rusted promises. "You're still wearing that old thing?" she said, voice dry. "I earned it." Her laugh was soft but surgical. "Yeah, well, maybe next time try earning a relationship with your kid instead." He nodded. Once. Slowly. As if the insult required space to land. As if even honor needed time to absorb humiliation. Then, Kyle appeared, tall, confident, flanked by 2 younger siblings he barely resembled. His gown was half unzipped, his smile wide, his stride unburdened. He spotted his mother and jogged toward her. He saw his father too, but his pace didn't change. "Hey," Kyle said, brushing past him like he was no more than a bystander. Thanks for coming. I didn't know if you'd still have the address. His voice held no malice, just formality, like a handshake offered at a funeral. I got your note, the old man said, pulling the card from his pocket.
Oh, right. That.
Mom said you'd probably try something. I just came to see you walk.
Yeah.
Well, you saw it. A silence fell between them. Not the comfortable silence of understanding, but the brittle, shallow kind that comes when both people know the moment has already died, and yet they're both still standing over the body. Then Kyle looked him in the eye. For the first time. And for a second, something flickered. Uncertainty? Guilt? Memory? You know, Kyle began, his tone suddenly sharper. Not everything's about what you did in the war. Not everything is about medals and duty and that silent suffering crap you always wore like a badge. You didn't show up when it mattered. I'm here now. Yeah, Kyle scoffed, with a pocket full of ghosts and a uniform like a costume party. The words were louder than intended. A few people nearby turned their heads. The old man didn't flinch. His voice, when it came, was barely above a whisper. I came because I hoped you'd see me. I see you. I just don't know what I'm supposed to feel. There it was. Not hate. Not anger. Something worse. Apathy dressed in politeness. The quiet erosion of connection. The slow, terminal disinterest. He nodded again, as if to say that's fair. Then, slowly, he extended something. A small box, wrapped in navy blue velvet, the kind given only to those who had stood longer, bled deeper, lost more than they were allowed to say. I was awarded this after my unit didn't come home. I kept it sealed. Thought I'd give it to my son. Maybe one day, he'd understand why silence isn't the same as absence. Kyle didn't take the box. Instead, his mother stepped in. Don't do this here. And just like that, he closed the box, placed it gently back inside his coat and backed away. No anger. No guilt. Just retreat. But as he turned to leave, something in the crowd shifted. A ripple. One of the cadets from earlier, still in uniform, stood to the side, watching. Not pretending. Not interfering. Just witnessing. The old man nodded to him. The cadet straightened. And though the son didn't see it, though the ex-wife turned away, though the world kept spinning around handshakes and hashtags, the man beneath the exit sign walked out into the fading light, his posture not proud, but dignified. Because sometimes the deepest injury is not the wound that bleeds, but the one that gets laughed off, dismissed, ignored, belittled, until even honor is made to feel like vanity. But he knew better, and he walked away, still whole. The bus station smelled of coffee gone cold and years left behind. The walls were stained with the memory of departures, the benches worn by waiting. It was the kind of place that swallowed goodbyes, where people spoke in half-sentences and looked past each other to avoid the weight of recognition. He liked it for that. The anonymity. The stillness between destinations. He sat in the far corner, near the vending machines, where the light flickered every few seconds like a tired heartbeat. His uniform coat folded neatly on his lap, box still inside. He hadn't planned on stopping here, but something in his chest told him not to go home just yet. Not after Kyle. Not after the silence. The echoes of boots and luggage wheels whispered along the tile. Across from him, a teenage boy, too thin for his jacket, sat hunched over a duffel bag, headphones in but not playing anything. The boy's shoes were scuffed. His face marked by sleep deprivation and something harder to name, abandonment, maybe. Or shame. The man noticed the patch on the bag. A faded American flag stitched above a name that had been half ripped off. It wasn't hard to guess. A runaway. Maybe a dropout. Maybe someone who didn't make it to the end of his own graduation ceremony. They didn't speak. Not at first. But the boy kept glancing at him, at the coat, at the stillness, at the old man's hands. Finally, the boy pulled out one earbud and asked, "You serve?" The old man didn't answer right away. He looked at the boy, not just at his face, but at the space behind his eyes, where boys carry the weight of absent fathers and unanswered questions. "I did," he said softly. The boy nodded, as if confirming something he already suspected. Thought so. You sit different. You running from something? The man asked. No, the boy replied, then paused. Maybe. I don't know. Just don't want to go back there. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was honest. Two strangers in a country that moves too fast for second chances, sitting still. After a while, the boy leaned back and closed his eyes. My dad used to wear his uniform around the house. Like he couldn't take it off, even when he wasn't going anywhere. That's how it is, the man said. Sometimes the uniform's the only thing that still fits. Was he proud? The boy asked. No, the old man replied. He was broken, but he wore it so no one could see the cracks. A long breath. Then the boy reached into his bag and pulled out a folded photo, creased and weathered. A man and a boy, smiling. 4th of July. Fireworks frozen behind them. He stopped smiling like that, the boy whispered. After the last tour. The old man looked down at the picture, then back at the boy. He probably didn't stop, he said. He just got tired of smiling where no one saw him. The boy stared at the picture like it owed him an apology. Then, with a kind of quiet finality, the old man opened his coat and took out the velvet box. Not rushed. Not dramatic. Just steady. He held it out, not directly to the boy, but between them, on the bench, like a shared offering. This wasn't for my son anymore, he said. I think maybe it's for someone who still has time to understand. The boy looked at the box, hesitant. I can't take that. You already did, the man replied. By being here. By still trying.
He didn't insist.
He just stood, gently resting the box beside the boy's duffel. The man didn't say goodbye. He didn't ask the boy's name. That wasn't the kind of moment this was. He simply nodded once, as if to mark something sacred, then walked out into the fading afternoon light. Behind him, the flickering bus station light hummed and snapped. The boy picked up the box with both hands, like it might break. And somewhere deep in his chest, where all runaways keep their questions, something softened. Not a solution. Not forgiveness. But maybe a place to begin again. Because sometimes, the most powerful encounters are the ones that pass without history, without names, just quiet mercy between two strangers stitched together by invisible scars. And neither of them would ever speak of it again. But both would remember. It began with a letter, folded 3 times, slipped into the mailbox of the town's only newspaper like a secret too heavy to carry any longer. There was no return address. No name. Just a line at the top. For those who watched and said nothing. The editor, a tired woman with more deadlines than sleep, nearly threw it out, until the weight of the handwriting stopped her. There was something trembling beneath the curves and corners. Not desperation. Not anger. Something else. Something like reckoning. As she read it, the newsroom grew quieter with each line. Phones stopped ringing. Keyboards stilled. Words like shame, truth, and witness danced with painful elegance between the margins. It wasn't a rant. It was a mirror. And it cut. The letter spoke of a boy named Kyle, not directly, but unmistakably. Of a veteran father, calm and dignified, humiliated beneath fluorescent lights and surveillance cameras. Of whispers behind counters. Of society's comfort in suspicion. Of how we clutch our policies tighter than our humanity. But it wasn't the old man who wrote it. The voice was younger. Sharper. Rawer. It spoke of absence. Of guilt. Of how easy it was to vanish from your father's world when the world convinced you his silence was weakness. It admitted to not calling, not writing, not answering the knock of memory. It confessed to letting others shape the image of a man who had once stood between strangers and danger without ever needing to be asked. And then it changed. The second half was different. A pulse returned. The letter described a moment, brief and wordless, on a bench in a Greyhound station. A man and a boy. A medal left behind, not as a symbol of glory, but as a burden shared. It didn't reveal who the boy was. Didn't say where he went next. But it said this. That boy was me once. Proud and furious. Lost in the echo of things my father never said. But now I know the echo wasn't silence. It was restraint. It was honor trying not to bleed into my youth. The editor didn't change a single word. She printed it in full, center column, front page. No headline. No comment. Just the letter. By noon, copies of the paper were sold out. By sunset, the letter had been shared across state lines. Online forums, veterans groups, community boards, each lit up with quiet confessions of their own. People began naming the moments they hadn't spoken up. The cashier who looked away. The neighbor who assumed the worst. The banker who mistook dignity for deception. Then, something strange began to happen. At that same bank where the old man had once stood humiliated, strangers started leaving folded notes taped to the door. I remember. I was wrong. Forgive the rest of us. No one knew who started it. But they didn't stop. The bank tried to remove them. The tape marks kept reappearing. Eventually, they gave up and placed a bulletin board out front instead, labeled in honor of those who stood alone. Kyle's name never appeared. Neither did his father's.
But the town changed.
In small ways. In ways that couldn't be voted on or televised. Clerks looked up longer when they handed back receipts. People hesitated before judging the next man in line. And at the bus station, someone nailed a plaque to the bench where the boy had once sat.
It read,
"You never know who you're sitting next to, but you can choose how you leave them." The son never stepped forward. He didn't need to. He had already answered the world the only way that mattered, with truth, with humility, with the courage to say what society had long chosen to forget, that silence is not peace, and suspicion is not protection. And sometimes, the loudest revolution begins with the quiet act of remembering who our fathers really were. They never found out who ordered the flag. It arrived one cold morning, folded into perfect triangles, placed inside a wooden shadow box with a glass pane so clean it reflected back more than just the cloth. It held the memory of silence and sacrifice. There was no accompanying note, no certificate, no announcement. Only a line etched delicately in brass across the bottom. He didn't ask to be remembered. That's why we must. The staff at the town library didn't know what to do with it at first. The man it honored had never registered for veterans' benefits. Never attended any parades. He didn't belong to any American Legion posts or write op-eds about duty. He came and went like a leaf caught in the rhythm of the wind, quiet, unnoticed, consistent. But someone had remembered. Someone had seen. And now the flag sat there, beside the biography section, between rows of books filled with names of those history remembered officially. One morning, a janitor named Tomas, who had once been deployed, once carried his brother's body through mud so thick it erased rank and memory, stood by that case and wept. Not loudly. Just enough for the tears to fall without wiping them away. A child noticed. A boy with a cast on his arm, who came to the library after school because it was warmer than home. He looked at the glass case and asked softly, "Was he famous?" Tomas crouched beside him, eyes still red, and said, "No. He was better than famous. He showed up when no one was looking." Elsewhere in the town, other things began to change, not because of speeches or posters, but because of how people started looking at each other. Slower. Gentler. There were fewer apologies made in passing, and more made eye to eye. At the grocery store, an elderly man in line with a military cap didn't get asked for extra ID when he paid with a check. The teller simply nodded and said, "Take your time, sir." At the high school, a student wrote an essay for a civics project entitled, "Not All Heroes Register Their Names." She described a moment when her grandfather stood up quietly in church, helped an unhoused man to his feet, and offered him his own coat without ever asking his name. She ended with the sentence, "My grandfather said real honor is like breath. You don't need to think about it to keep someone alive." The essay won no prize. But the principal read it aloud at morning assembly. And when she finished, the room stayed quiet, not out of obligation, but reverence. One evening, long after sunset, a young man walked past the bus station where a small plaque still marked the bench.
He paused.
Hands in his coat pockets, face half lit by the flickering lamp above. His eyes lingered on the words. You never know who you're sitting next to, but you can choose how you leave them. He didn't sit down. He simply stood there, long enough to remember something his father once said when no one else was around. Honor doesn't come with a card. It comes when you let others walk away feeling more human than when they met you. The young man smiled, just barely, and left a folded slip of paper beneath the plaque. It read, "Thank you for waiting, Dad. I'm finally listening." He walked away before anyone could see, but somewhere someone would. Because honor, real honor, doesn't wear medals. It doesn't ask for applause. It doesn't knock or announce itself. It doesn't arrive on schedule or need permission to enter a room. It lives in the quiet spaces, in how we treat the stranger with the tired eyes, in how we hold back judgment long enough to hear the full sentence, in how we carry the weight of those who chose dignity when the world offered anything but. And when history forgets to write down their names, honor remembers anyway, because honor needs no invitation. It simply shows up
And stays.